Twissin about to react to it begins NYC starts arresting migrants. Let's see.
Several asylum seekers were recently arrested after an attack took place on the NYPD right here in Times Square. But after being controversially released, they may have fled the city and the country, and critics say this kind of thing is probably going to happen again.
Plenty of questions tonight about the aftermath of a brutal attack.
4 out of the 5 men originally arrested were released without bail.
Why aren't they in jail right now? Our criminal justice system is upside down.
Even more concerning, it's believed some of those suspects have already skipped town.
What do you have to say to the people of New York? You have nothing to say to the citizens of New York?
Police report a jump of 1,885 assaults in 2022 to 2,235 last year.
Here we are in Times Square, right where this incident took place. Now, some of the people involved have been arrested, released, others never got caught, and there's a manhunt underway for them right now. Where are you guys from?
Arizona.
If people beat up the cops in Arizona, do they get released without bail?
No.
Now, why those folks walked free, that's its own controversial issue, which we'll get to. But first, it's important to understand that although there seems to be mass outrage over all of this from everybody, including citizens and the police, what many people don't realize is that this kind of thing in New York, an attack against police or something crazy that just goes unpunished, that's how things normally work in New York. And look at this, late last year, police officers were assaulted after asking people to stop smoking cigarettes in the subway where there's cameras everywhere. The officer in that incident ended up in the hospital. And look at this other crazy story nobody heard about. Someone had an illegal weapon in the subway, committed a crime, and they were also released without bail. And what that means is this story, the controversial arrest and release of these suspects, is part of a much larger thing happening here in New York that is very frightening and that nobody really wants to discuss. And that's why we're not only going to break down what happened between police and the asylum seekers, we're also going to go over why the district attorney released them without bail, and we're going to look at actions the NYPD is now taking that some people think are controversial and retaliatory. But first, we've got to go over why the NYPD was attacked right here in one of the busiest, most iconic parts of New York City.
Around 8:30 Saturday night, you can see 5 men and 2 officers interacting on camera. Seems calm and ordinary until the pair of officers attempt to take down one of the men in yellow, pictured here. And then it gets ugly.
You saw the video. Reprehensible. Cowards.
It starts with...
So, as you can see from the video, the police, they were here and they were just out on a routine patrol. But then they saw something suspicious happening and decided to move in. And then they put their hands on one of the individuals, and that's when everything took a turn for the worse. Now, these officers, they're armed. And even though this was an extremely tragic incident, armed officers could have decided to escalate things further. And the fact that they didn't shows incredible restraint on their part. But to add insult to injury, the controversial actions taken by Manhattan's district attorney probably made the whole situation way worse, as you're about to see.
T.A. Bragg, why did you not ask for bail? Why didn't you ask for bail? District Attorney Alvin Bragg trying to get away from questions about his decision to release 5 migrants charged with assaulting 2 NYPD officers in Times Square. You have nothing to say to the citizens of New York?
No bail. You're free to go, but you have to come back. That's essentially what these guys were told. And critics say that the failure to protect officers and the public by keeping these people off the streets is sending the wrong signal. Basically, it's letting the crime world know that there aren't a whole lot of consequences here for doing something like this. Now, normally, it's the district attorney's job to protect the general public by keeping dangerous criminals off the streets. And it's not like bail denies someone their freedom. You post bail and you get the bail back as long as you come back. And look, I don't know as much about the law as the district attorney does, whether you agree with him or not, but critics say he's controversially claiming that there wasn't enough evidence to hold these guys in lieu of bail in the first place. This is one of the folks who was released, and regardless of whether or not he's innocent, this isn't a respectful way to act around law enforcement. And now that they've been released, the only thing holding them accountable to come back to court is the honor system, because they're out on their own right now. They could be anywhere, and nobody seems to know where that is. Now, the latest information that the police have is that the suspects fled the city after using fake names to obtain bus tickets through a non-profit. People are saying that by using a bus to get out of town through a non-profit, they likely would have encountered very few police on their way out of the state. And that probably means they won't be back in court. But this raises a much larger, more concerning question.
Why?
that these 4 individuals be released on their own recognizance. Our criminal justice system is upside down.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people, not just in New York, but in the entire country, have very similar questions. But the way that the courts work in New York City is why these guys were released. And that's because there are 2 schools of thought on how to prosecute crime. The first is to prosecute everybody and lock them up and throw away the key. And the second is that over-prosecuting crime or prosecuting the wrong person for the wrong crime is going to have a negative impact on society as a whole, so we should be very careful before we turn the wheels of justice. And that explains why the district attorney said that there wasn't enough evidence to hold everybody that was on video. He didn't want to prosecute the wrong people. And the reason people say not enough video evidence is kind of ridiculous is because Times Square is one of the most heavily surveilled places in America. And that's why the release of these suspects, as outrageous as some might find it, that's just how things work here in the city. But there's another problem, and that's because New York City is a sanctuary city, and that special status may have actually made things easier for the suspects to escape and possibly evade justice.
Now, there is some question whether the city's sanctuary city status would keep these men from being deported until after they are convicted. However, the mayor's chief of staff today says if federal authorities wish to deport, the city will cooperate.
So it sounds like city officials are deferring to the federal government on the issue of deportation. And as much as the governor and other folks are crying for deportation for these same individuals, that's not something the city has any control over. And it's not like New York is a sanctuary city by accident. And it might be part of the reason why the suspects were so able to easily find a sympathetic not-for-profit that would help them out without asking too many questions. And the reason they probably went with a nonprofit for the bus tickets instead of the city, who also offers them for free, is because if you go to the city's re-ticketing center, it's surrounded by police. They're gonna know exactly who you are. You're gonna be on camera. And sometimes across the street from where the city is giving out free bus tickets, nonprofits do things like food giveaways and clothing drives, and they even hand out resources like this pamphlet right here in Spanish that helps connect new arrivals with legal support, housing support. But it seems like the generosity of local New Yorkers was taken advantage of, as well as the generosity of the court system. But where exactly could these folks ultimately be headed? Are they going to stay in America or go somewhere else?
Of course, go somewhere else.
Information coming from a high-ranking police source reveals the suspects may be headed for the Mexican border. This says they're due in court on the 20th, and calls grow louder for them to be deported.
So if these guys are headed to Mexico, I don't know how they're going to make it back here in order to go to court on time. They might not make it. But as it turns out, some of the suspects were recently arrested in Arizona, and it remains to be seen what their ultimate fate will be. And even if they don't come back to the city, there will probably still be some sort of court case and charges that are filed against these guys. They may in fact be convicted. If that does happen, there could be arrest warrants for them, so they'll probably not do themselves any favors by coming back. But only about half of the folks involved have been apprehended so far, and there's a manhunt going on now for the rest.
This morning, the search continues for 6 asylum seekers. Governor Hochul had this to say on Thursday.
Get them all and send them back. You don't touch our police officers. You don't touch anybody.
Around the same time, the governor...
So, as it turns out, one person was actually charged and held with bail, $15,000. And the reasons for the court holding him right now are shocking. Apparently, he's been arrested 4 other times for petty larceny, which is theft of amounts under $1,000. Now a misdemeanor charge here in New York. Plus, he's got 2 open cases and a guilty plea on disorderly conduct charges, which means he's had 6 run-ins with the police thus far. And it's worth noting that if this person hadn't been involved in the police assault, if they had stolen something for the 5th time, they would still be out there. The only reason they even got held is because they committed this crazy thing after doing several other very bad things. But as frustrating as all this may seem, the NYPD has started a massive crackdown on certain types of illegal activity, so much so that humanitarian activists are saying that it almost seems retaliatory for what happened to them in Times Square.
Tonight, only Eyewitness News was there as an army of police fanned out at migrant facilities throughout the city, targeting a problem that's exploded in recent months: unregistered scooters, which cops say have become a persistent quality of life issue, particularly in Manhattan.
So, as someone who's been covering this for quite some time, I've always been very shocked at the number of illegal unregistered mopeds. Over here is one of the city's shelters, the Row Hotel, and most of the mopeds that were over here are gone now. And this remaining bike has a plate. But as you'll soon see, these raids, the removal and confiscation of bikes, these have been pretty controversial. But it's also controversial that people have been driving something that's dangerous without any proof of registration or any ability to be held accountable if they cause an accident. Previously, in front of the shelters, none of them would have plates. But look, you got a police car right here. It seems the crackdown is working. But the reason this is controversial is because many of these bikes are being used for the only type of job many asylum seekers can get, which is a job using something like this to do a lot of deliveries. There's a lot of demand for deliveries, no barrier to entry. All you need is a bike and a smartphone. But studies show that unchecked minor crime can lead in some instances to higher rates of more dangerous, more violent types of crime. And for a long time, there hasn't been any consequence towards owning an unregistered bike, and many people are very thankful that finally something is being done about it.
Individuals attacking our police officers, that's not going to happen.
NYPD Assistant Commissioner Kaz Daughtry led teams of cops tonight. Some scoured the area around the Row Hotel, a migrant center in Hell's Kitchen, and they inspected more of those bikes, which have been involved in a growing number.
Now, the reason that this is controversial and being pegged as retaliatory is because the crackdowns are taking place in areas like this, by the shelters, where a high number of illegal bikes are parked. However, this is a public parking location. Anyone can park in one of these bike corrals, and since the police don't know who owns the bikes, they could be owned by asylum seekers, or they could be used by people who are unfairly taking advantage of asylum seekers who don't have work authorization yet. For a fee, you can get access to a bike and a delivery app that's all set up with somebody else's work-related information, which means that even if you yourself don't have work authorization, you can still work on behalf of somebody else who takes a cut from the pay and is supposed to give you the rest. There are reports of that never happening. And that's the reason so many of these don't have plates. What if the person riding it commits a crime? Red light cameras, speed cameras, hit and runs. With no plate, the person who actually owns the bike won't be held accountable. As well as the next type of crime the police say these are perfect for.
We are seeing an uptick on scooter robberies in the city, particularly in Manhattan, South Manhattan, North, where individuals are on scooters, normally two on a scooter, and they're taking your cell phone, they're taking your AirPods, your Beats, your wallet, your purse.
So, purse snatchings, phone snatchings, again, unregistered bikes, we have no idea who the perpetrators of these crimes are. All the police know is that unregistered bikes were used, and that's why they're getting rid of them. But based on how New York City's laws work, it would be foolish to assume that the only people committing these crimes are the people who live in the shelters. As we've already seen, regular New Yorkers commit plenty of crime as well, and they know how the laws work too. But some people say even with heavy-handed tactics like this, the NYPD is still fighting a losing battle. Because even if they were to remove every single illegal bike from the streets of New York completely, it may make no difference as to whether or not attacks on officers will subside. And that's what's really scary.
Police report a jump of 1,885 assaults in 2022 to 2,235 last year, representing a more than 15% spike in assaults during that period.
It really begs the question.
That is incredibly scary. Assaults on police officers are up 15%. Insane. Now, if you don't like the police, this isn't going to matter much to you. But if you're a law-abiding citizen, knowing that armed police are being victimized, if the police are being targeted, what chance does somebody like you or me walking down the street have? If the police are in danger, everyone is in danger. And experts say that's for several reasons. First, if there are no consequences for attacking the police, there won't be any consequences for any of the rest of us being attacked either. And since the entire world just saw the police get assaulted with no consequences for those who did it, it makes a lot of sense that this kind of thing could unfortunately become much more common. And that's frightening because of the second reason.
When we look to situations such as officers being assaulted and the actual offenders being released, it really creates a greater propensity for people not wanting to take the job as being a police officer.
Police morale is going to be at an all-time low. Nobody's going to want to become a cop anymore, and we've already got a shortage of officers, and now we're not protecting the officers who are outside doing their jobs. Apparently, recruitment numbers have been incredibly low over the last year or so. And in 2022, 65% less people wanted to be police than they did in 2017. And in 2015 and 2016, the NYPD had so many applicants, they didn't even offer the exam. And last year, they offered it 2 or 3 times. And this is very bad news for people who live in New York. A city with an inability to hire police, or just less police overall, is going to be a less safe city. On top of that, the starting pay for officers is also a big disincentive. $58,000 starting pay after 5 years. You'll be able to make over $100,000. Policing the streets of New York is definitely not a get-rich-quick scheme, that's for sure. And that means that most of the people who sign up do so for reasons other than money. They want to make the city a better, safer safer place. But if you see your fellow officers getting attacked on TV, how motivating is that going to be for you to put your life in danger when the court system here does not have your back? Speaking of which, do you think it was the right decision to release these folks without bail? Do you think they're going to come back in time for court? And what do you think the city should do to better protect its police and the rest of New York? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
Ooh. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next video.